Alright everyone, we start off today talking again about the Israel-Gaza war that's raging on. Israel is now mounting a full-on ground invasion, and they've had some success in pushing forward and eliminating Hamas targets in northern Gaza, and the Gaza Strip. They're now on the outskirts of Gaza City, actually. Yesterday they secured one of the main highways there, so they have basically free reign with their tanks and so forth. So they're continuing to fight. Hamas, however, continues to fight as well. They're still lobbing rockets and mortars and so forth into Israel on a daily basis. The IDF is continuing to bomb things. Of course, you don't want to bomb too close to where your own people are operating. That could be a problem. Slow, but, the IDF is making progress. At this point, I think the hazard, again, number one for Israel is optics. So as you continue to fight, you are going to kill more civilians. Disproportionately, the fighting is happening in Gaza. It's not in Israel at this point, physically speaking, other than the rocket attacks. So you have a lopsided amount of civilian casualties. This is something, when I point it out, people think I'm like being fucking pro-Palestine. I'm neither pro-Palestine nor pro-Israel, but I'm pointing out an obvious flaw with the IDF's plan. Netanyahu's plan ultimately risks angering the entire world community. Nobody gives a fucking shit if the UN decides to condemn you. Nobody cares if the UN calls for a ceasefire and Netanyahu says, up yours. They're right to ignore the UN. The UN ain't the group that you want to go to broker any ceasefire anyway. It's a lost proposition. It was never going to happen. Netanyahu would immediately lose his job politically if he agreed to such terms. And rightfully so, by the way. The globalistic hack community is far worse than, well, basically any other entity that could possibly get involved. But now you've got UNICEF, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, and a million other aid groups that are trying to operate within Gaza to keep on life support a group of over 2 million civilians in a shrinking area that's not subject to combat, with fewer and fewer facilities, with little aid actually allowed to flow in on a regular basis. They need far more of it, with Hamas there to take much of that aid anyway and keep it from the public and use it for their own purposes. And what you're looking at is the prelude to what could potentially become a humanitarian catastrophe that rises to the level of war crimes that the United States will no longer be able to condone. At some point, you could see a strange situation. And I know most of you will say this is, oh, it's pie in the sky, it's never going to happen. Okay. Let's say Israel has gone completely rogue. Israel is a nuclear state, with the Samson option and stuff. Direct military intervention against Israel by any state entity is effectively impossible. It would be insane for anyone that's actually capable of winning against them to attack them, because as you're winning, the little red button might get pressed, assuming that they have nukes, but the Pentagon pretty much put that issue to rest in an '84 report, which was classified until the last decade, actually, saying that the best they could tell, nuclear triggers were stolen directly from the United States, and they had enough fissile material to have a stockpile of 40, 50 weapons, maybe 100 weapons, or thereabouts. That's a lot of nukes. It's enough to reduce most of the Levant to a goddamn glowing crater, and certainly change the climate a little bit more than man's other activities have had hitherto. Anyway, Israel is currently pushing Hamas back. You're pushing Hamas physically into areas that are more and more densely and more civilian populated, while people flee to areas that haven't been bombed. Hamas is going along with them. They still haven't figured out the Hamas tunnels, what they're going to do with that. Seal them up, keep bombing them, gas them out, which, again, would probably spark ire. The problem becomes, if the U.S. ever gets it in mind, it would be for political reasons, not moral ones. Let's say the Biden admin realizes that public perception is shifting heavily against Israel because the casualties keep mounting and mounting and mounting. What do? You can't force Israel to do anything, but you also can't look weak and pathetic and beg them to stop and then they don't stop. You would have to act in some way, but you can't attack them. So what do? You could see a situation where Israel accidentally makes itself a pariah state where the East Bloc was already against them. Then the Western Bloc says, we can't do business with you anymore. You've gone apeshit. and then they get attacked by everyone immediately, and then they invoke the Samson option. World War III? No. Regional conflict that escalates into a nuclear exchange? Yeah, absolutely. I hate to tell you this, but that is now on the table if they continue with this particular plan. It's all well and good for people to say it's justified if they mount every Hamas member's head on a pike, like a Vivek Ramaswamy. Or Nikki Haley, oh, they should definitely be violated before we mount them on the pikes. They're sort of doing the one-upsmanship thing right now. Advantage Haley, by the way, she's much more of a warmonger. Vivek doesn't come off as very believable when he pretends that he would take up a machine gun and execute a bunch of Hamas members. That's fine. It's Hamas. They're terrorists. I don't care if you kill them. The problem is, in the process of eliminating them, you are bringing yourself closer and closer to triggering a localized catastrophe that will spill over into a regional, potentially nuclear conflict. You could end up with that scenario. Even if the U.S. doesn't bow out, what if the rest of the Western sphere gets pissed at the U.S.? What if our allies decide to weigh in on it and they say, look, U.S., you need to stop promoting and allowing this to happen. You need to get involved. You helped to cause the situation, and so do something about it, or we're not going to trade with you. The U.S. could end up getting shuttered out by some of its allies over such a situation. It would be, there's no way that you could possibly not condemn it if Israel manages to choke out 1 million civilian lives. Well, you're getting close to that. Every aid group in the region, aid groups from the East Bloc, aid groups from the West Bloc, aid groups that are more globalistic, aid groups that are more private charitable organizations, religious aid groups, irreligious aid groups, left-leaning aid groups, right-leaning aid groups. This is the Israel-Palestine area after all. Groups that are associated with Judaism, groups associated with Islam. Every group in the world wants a slice of the Gaza pie right now. Every single one of them, pretty much, of any note whatsoever, is telling everyone else in the world the situation is intolerable. Aid workers are dying by the dozens each day, and Gazan civilians are dying. Over 1 million people have inadequate access to even the most basic rudimentary things that you need to live, let alone thrive. Nobody in Gaza other than the Hamas leadership is doing that right now. At some point, Israel might find itself a pariah state. Not because it's not justified in retaliating against Hamas, but because of the plurality of people that are being killed that aren't Hamas at all. And they can use they use human shields excuse all they want. And you're incentivizing Hamas effectively to just grab more women and children and surround themselves by them when they fire their rockets. Every time that happens, by the way, you're making more Hamas members. Those are people's family members. Libertarian Party posted a picture the other day, and it shows a little kid crawling out of the wreckage. An Israeli rocket has hit their home. And then it shows him growing up and he's a Hamas soldier. While that's rather reductionist, it is fundamentally true. This is also why the U.S. has so many problems with non-state actors. When you are a state actor with a routine military, real one, fully organized, especially when you're lopsidedly much more wealthy and powerful than the person that you're attacking, the problem is that every time you conduct a strike, you risk making more enemies. And at some point, you also risk drawing in other groups. The other risk here, really, for Israel is not Hamas. Hamas does not actually pose an existential threat to Israel. Why do you think there are so many warmongers right now rabble-rousing about the need to invade the Iranians? Like that would be the most wonderful idea in the world. Why do you think they're doing that? As a foil. As long as Israel's just pit-bombing Hamas, maybe things can remain calm, but there are other groups in the region that are probably going to act at some point, and they'll have a reason to do so. Israel will begin to look like the unmitigated bad guy to the average person in the world because they're a state actor. They're a standardized military. They have a fully incepted civic system and recognition internationally and diplomacy and things like that. Palestine is a quasi-entity whose militia is quite literally a militia. These are effectively like guardsmen more than they are an organized fighting force. The closest approximation to a fighting force with some degree of leverage towards a force like that fielded by the IDF would be Hezbollah, or the Syrians, or something like that. Maybe ISIS in its heyday. ISIS, though, is too busy carving up Libya, where they're still allowed to exist because of the Clinton administration. Oh, wait. I mean the Obama administration. I'm sure that Clinton wasn't calling the shots when it came to certain aspects of foreign policy. I believe that a lot. So, yeah, Gaza City is now under siege directly. They've created their northern buffer zone. They've accomplished that. It's just a matter of they keep rejecting ceasefire agreements. Again, the UN brokered one. I would side with Israel completely on that. I wouldn't want to agree to any deal brokered by the UN either. But at some point, they're going to have to stop or attempt to mitigate civilian casualties, or simply force the Egyptians to allow all Palestine to evacuate as Israel forms a single state solution. It's possible. That's another out, and it wouldn't even lead to a nuclear war. At this point, I think that a lot of people in Palestine are upset enough so they probably accept such a thing. Then if they pay us reparations afterwards, we'll set up in the Sinai. You still share a border with them. There will still be rocket attacks and shit, but I don't know. I don't really see any solution to the situation that doesn't involve mass death, unfortunately. That's about all. Peace out.